news editor at The Tribune, the newspaper which has been voice of the people for last 141 years. Having spent more than 25 years in the newspaper industry, please welcome Mrs. Renu Sood Sinha. Welcome, ma'am. Ma'am, so my first question to you is, how did you begin your journey? Like from starting and then ending up in the Tribune?
So my father was a journalist. He was the news editor of the vernacular paper called the Hind Samachar, which is an Urdu paper. So I've seen him, growing up in my years. I've seen him, and he was working in the industry at the time when the terrorism was at the peak. And there were so many other, during emergency, during terrorism. So I've seen like him working, in all those terrible times which the state faced. So I have always been inspired by him. And then I love writing, I love literature, I love the language. So this career was an obvious choice for me. So after finishing my post-graduation at PU, I got the chance to, they advertised and I appeared for a paper and I cleared despite not having a journalism degree at that time. So yeah, it was in 1995 that I joined the Tribune and I've been working here since then. If you have to work in North, this is the best newspaper I think I have been lucky enough to be associated with. So yes.
And why a newspaper and never, let's say, TV channels taking up?
See, when we began in 1995, so the newspaper industry was like really well established. It was very well established and very well respected. So these channels were just beginning and there was not much opportunity available at that time. Newspapers were a very respected medium. So yeah, it's an obvious choice. It was an obvious choice and I have never regretted it ever. It's like, yeah.
So on to the next question. What difference do you see in the media field, the time when you started and now?
See, there has been a huge difference because when we started way back in 95, the newspaper industry was in a transitioning mode in more ways than one. From the technological point of view, because when I joined, I remember we still had those teleprinters. There were just two agencies, so there was not much of those sources or resources. And I have during my first few years, I have seen those. How do you say? Those. The computers were not even introduced in the designing this thing, and so it used to be the we had something called a bromide.
Okay.
That they would type out, and then they would. It was a shiny sort of this thing. Where they would keep print the news.
Okay.
Different this thing, and then the whole page layout used to be pasted.
Okay.
So that was the time we began. So I'm forgetting typeset it was called. It was like typeset. So the blocks and all. So that was the time we began, and then of course slowly the computers came, the internet came. Then now in recent years the social media. So yes, there has been a huge difference, but sadly, the more the number of resources, the more the number of anything, the validity of the news or the truth behind it has gone for a toss. So in earlier days when there were less number of resources for fact checking or something, so there was more credibility and clarity to the news. So that is like, the less was more, basically.
But at the same time, people today are let's say, more educated. Reason being, now they do not tend to believe. They again, like we talked, they do not tend to believe whatever they are served. Basically, they go again through the same thing, whatever being given to them, like we give a news to them. There is this thing now, ki, let's check it again, or like if it's true or not. So that wasn't happening back in the days.
So see, when you say there's a plethora of resources, it works both ways, for the newspaper as well as for the reader,
Yes.
right? So as newspaper, because normally from the reporting point of view, from the news point of view, if I did not have resources, okay, so I would go to the source. I would go on the ground to check it. So from the credibility point of view, this was much more, as a reader may perhaps. And reader also, since as you point out कि उनके पास भी ज़्यादा वो नहीं था अगर वो check करने के लिए, so they also tend to believe to whatever was printed. As I said, credibility was more. Credibility was more. Changing technology, changing political scenario, changing integrities, so it has affected a lot many things and lot many sources, resources, people, industry. So yeah.
So how news have changed in the sense how earlier journalists used to collect them, right?
See,
at the same time, the perceiving.
The news has changed is that it is not news anymore. So now there's this concept of paid news.
Okay.
So if it is paid, then it is not news.
Okay.
So yeah. So it's like as I said, even from the reporting or news gathering point of view, there's a plethora of resources. So at times, and also there is this. There's this race to break. So that does not give you the time to cross-check facts. So this race against time, so that is affecting not just the credibility, it is affecting the time you have, which you have for checking it. In earlier days when it was like not that hardcore race to break the news, whether it is your Twitter trends or your breaking, whether it's electronic media or print media or digital world. So there they would there was that we had that little luxury of time to at least cross check our facts and what we are giving is correct. So now that luxury is not there because of the race against time, to be the part of the rat race or the breaking news, mad rush. So sources are more, and the new age reporters, there's this tendency to report while seeing the live streaming or that kind of a thing. I would say that's a very lazy way of reporting. Because when you go to the ground, when you go to that actual spot, so there are so many things which are also happening which may not be part of the main news, but they are impacting it. Also, when you are directly talking to your source, face-to-face contacts or connects are always different. He might slip in, something different or something more. Or as if you are a keen reporter or a keen observer, you will observe so many things which are happening in the background, but which would be very impacting that news somewhere or the other. So despite your internet or social media or your so many other sources, I still feel going to the spot is still the best way to go about it.
And what about the viewers and the readers, like their perceiving, like how they perceive the news, how that like over the time, how this has changed basically, how people perceive the news by reading or by viewing?
See, that also depends which niche or which generation you are catering to.
Okay.
See, so people in the older generation, they still tend to believe the print media more, but the younger generation, which is consuming more and more of the digital media, so they, even for their news, they'll go to the digital media. So, but again, digital media, more sources of having information, I will not say correct news. So that also tends to, affect your perception.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
like, let's say wars. Recently, we saw, last year we saw Taliban taking over Afghanistan. This year, we are seeing, since February, we are seeing Russia, Ukraine. There are days when, there are not actually days, there are, it gets like weeks. We see so tedious and so boring news.
not tedious, not boring. It could be hardcore. It could be when the second wave happened. There was all, grief pouring in from all across. So yes, so it's like, okay, carry on.
Like that's there are days when this thing happens, and then there are days when it's so much negativity that you do not want to pick up a newspaper, or you do not want to switch on the news channels, because you can't consume it in the first place. How, as an industry person or as a journalist, you are supposed to make an equilibrium, that okay, now it's getting over the top, we are supposed to stop here, people are not consuming it the way it should be consumed, or it is getting negative.
So it's not like stopping. It is actually, it's trying to find the right balance. Not even trying to find the right balance. It is finding the right balance. So it is, if you remember the Taliban war, even the Ukraine war, even the COVID thing, when it was like, there was deaths all around, there was all misery, it was all grief. So, okay, so that you will report. You cannot close your eyes to what is happening around you. Even if the people are not consuming, they still would want to know what's happening. You cannot close your eyes. ठीक है, यूक्रेन की अगर war हो रही है, तो if you have some people living in Ukraine, you would still want to know what is happening. You will not close. So somewhere or the other it is impacting. Whether it is impacting you in a more personal or emotional manner, or whether it is affecting your economy. पेट्रोल महंगा हो रहा, तुम्हारा क्यों महंगा हो रहा, तो मतलब you would want to know. ठीक है, you may get tired of it, you may get upset. So during those times, it's like, then you focus on the positive stories. Not positive stories as in aankh band karke positive stories, because even in these situations, there would be people who were doing good work. So because COVID में अगर बुरा हो रहा था तो अच्छा भी हो रहा था. There were so many people who were, they were giving those free meals and they were helping, they were doing so many things. They were, और कुछ नहीं तो there were stories के, they were just people who was helping them in the cremation. और जिनकी families कई बार wiped out थी, they were not in the condition. So there were so many things which were happening, which was like, the feel good, not the feel good, but there were actually positive things happening. So then, for those times, there are positive heroes to focus on.
So like a headline will be about COVID only, but at the same time, the next column will be regarding.
Not next column. If your generation reads the newspapers well, you would say the page one anchor in any newspaper is always a positive story.
Yes.
Is always a positive story. That is how you balance out. कि ऊपर जो मर्जी हो रहा है, you are presenting the reality, but the reality is this also. Yeah. There are good people also there, so you focus on that. This is how you find a balance.
Okay. So we talk about this generation, the coming generation, the Gen Zs or millennials we call. So they are in kind of a dilemma. Okay. They want to bring the change, right? But then they see big conglomerates or political parties getting involved with news agencies. Obviously, these kids want to join news agencies only because they find that this the most respectable job to do so, to bring the change. But again, what is your consoling message to them?
So there's nothing like a consoling message. So either you have it in you or you don't. So because you have to make the distinction whether it is your passion or your profession. Don't call it a respectable job. Okay? If it is your calling, then you will do it anyway.
Okay.
Fine. But you need to know, because being a journalist or being in the newspaper industry or being in the news industry, whether it's your electronic media or whether it is digital media or the print media, you need to decide whether you want to treat it as your job or whether it is your passion. So I'll again go back to Ravish.
Okay.
So he heard his inner voice. He resigned, but same time he started his own YouTube channel. I don't know whether he has any plan with him or not, but ठीक है, कोई business plan है नहीं है, वो आगे succeed करता है कि नहीं करता है, monetize होता है कि नहीं, but since it has been his passion, he has just started it. So it's for you to like.
But again, when we talk about likes of Ravish Kumar, he has his own name, he is a prominent person in the field of journalism, right? And when we talk about people coming, the new generation, when they try to join, they believe in something. They believe in, let's say, they believed in NDTV. That, okay, this is they are doing something different. Let's go with them. And suddenly, things like this happen, that a big conglomerate, which actually nobody knew, people knew about them, but they weren't this big. And suddenly
they were not expecting them to buy
when you do not see any point in them, the Adani's buying NDTV, these private players coming into the field of news agencies. So again, we are believing in something, we are joining some field. What's the next thing for us now? Okay, NDTV is finished. Now what's the next step for us?
See, your question is in two parts, that he is a name.
Yeah.
But then what I would want to say is that when he started off, he was not a name. He made it. He made a name for himself, right? Whatever the time or the hard work or whatever it took him. So he made this name for himself, and also हर दौर का एक अपना वो होता है. So if NDTV is finished, in a few years there would be another NDTV or another platform or another newspaper or another channel. And also, idealism hota hai, that is the prerogative of the youth, but there has to be some pragmatism also, that you learn on the way, that you learn with years. So initially, you can't just live your life on idealism also. So you need that touches of pragmatism, although not totally pragmatism, because then if idealism is lost, then everything is lost.
Today's pragmatism is based on money, probably?
It does matter.
Yeah.
It does matter. Eventually, again, monetize कहाँ से करोगे?
Yes.
अगर even if to present the news, अगर आपके पास resources ही नहीं हैं, तो कहाँ से करोगे? तो कहीं ना कहीं तो you need to find the balance. But of course you don't have to sell your soul. That would be your decision. That would be your call. कि बेचनी है तो कितनी बेचनी है? So yeah.
Okay. That's all for the interview. Thank you so much, ma'am, for giving us your precious time. And we hope that Tribune goes on like this forever, presenting us, like I said earlier, Tribune has been the voice of people for last 141 years. So thank you so much, ma'am.
All the best.